Hi everyone, it's John from What Up, and welcome back to another video. Now, this will be my breakdown of Episode 7 of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show, The Dark Along the Ways. So we're going to walk through the episode scene by scene, we're going to explain some things, talk about some stuff, maybe discuss the differences between what happened in the books versus what happened in the show, and we'll talk about a lot of things that they cut, and I think at this point, they've been cut intentionally, and we're going to talk about that during the video as well. Now, if you're new to the channel and you don't know what I do here, I cover Wheel of Time show news and pretty much anything and everything about the Sony and Amazon production. So that's official news, leaks, castings, pictures, videos, and I do a bunch of breakdowns for each one of the episodes that gets released weekly as well. So if you like Wheel of Time content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now, before we get into the video, spoiler warning, in this video we're talking about episode 7 of the Wheel of Time. So if you haven't seen at least the first 7 episodes of the first season, be forewarned, I'm going to talk about elements from all of them and ruin the 7th episode in its entirety. Also, if you haven't read at least the first 4 books of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series, that's The Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, The Dragon Reborn, and The Shadow Rising, I'm going to talk about character arcs and plot points from all 4 of those books, so that's going to be spoiled as well. Alright, all of that being said, let's get on to the video. Alright, so we start out with what is probably the best cold open of the entire series, if not of pretty much any show I've ever seen. This is the Blood Snow, and it is absolutely fantastic. Now, we don't get to see this word for word as it is shown on the screen in the books, although, as far as I'm concerned, it's fairly accurate, and I'll tell you why. So, we learn a little bit about the Blood Snow, what happens during the Eye of the World when Tam recounts some tales of how he found Rand during his fever dream. Now, we do get to see some of this later on in this episode, although I think they intentionally left that out from the show in the very first episode, Leave Taking, because, let's face it, it gives away who the dragon is right away, and Amazon, for some reason, wanted to keep that mystery up until the 7th episode. I still don't personally understand that, but let me know in the comments down below if you folks do. But then again, later on in the 4th book, The Shadow Rising, we did hear a lot more about Rand's history after he meets the Aiel and he learns about where he came from, and we learn a few different facts about this. So during the Blood Snow, we meet this lady right here. This is Tigraine Mantir. She is of Andorian nobility, and she was basically around an Aes Sedai that gave a foretelling. Now, foretelling was if she did not go to the Aiel Waste, join the Maidens of the Spear, which is one of their warrior societies, and basically become one, the world was doomed. So she gave up everything. And we're going to do another video about Tigraine at some point or another, explaining the full history behind this, because there's a whole lot. It's pretty convoluted, and in fact, Rand's sort of half related to a bunch of different people in the show, but we'll get into that during that video. But she does go, she joins the Maidens of the Spear, and she takes the name Shael. Now, this is, as far as the show is concerned, Tigraine Mantir. That's how she's credited in the credits, and she's never referred to as her Aiel name ever that we've seen yet. I think that may change later on. But essentially, she gets pregnant by a clan chief who she falls in love with, and when she's pregnant, normally a Maiden of the Spear would not go to war. What they would do is they would stay home, they would birth their child, and then give the child up to the clan to raise so they can continue along being a Maiden of the Spear. She didn't do that because part of the foretelling was that she had to do this. She had to go here to the Battle of the Shining Walls, and she had to basically go to war. So she did, and she fights a bunch of the Illinar companions here, and we know that near the end of this scene, we meet Tam Thor, who is Rand's dad. Really fantastic, very powerful scene, and this is essentially Rand being born on the slopes of Dragonmount, and Tam picking him up and caring for him afterwards. Really, really cool scene. Alright, now we cut to the Ways. Now, basically this part of the show is essentially a journey for most of the Emond's Fielders through the Ways, and they start at Tar Valon and they end up at Fal Dara. Now, in the book series, things are a little bit different. So what we have in the book series is the fact that they're in Kingland, the entire group of them. They meet Loyal in the inn, and they realize they need to go to the Eye of the World, and the closest way gate that they can exit that's not already overtaken by the Blight is in Fal Dara, so that's what they decide to do. Now, when they enter the Ways, Moiraine uses the trefoil leaf to open up the Waygate to let them into the Ways, and then they travel through the Ways. Now, once they're in the Ways, there is some hints of someone following them, so maybe it's Pat and Fane. That's what you're led to believe during the books, but it's not expressly said at the time, at least anyway. Then they exit the Ways with the Black Wind coming upon them, scaring everybody. So, sort of what happens here. Now, in the show, they've changed that. The Waygate is outside Tar Valon because there is no Caemlyn. They've all entered the Ways except for Mat. Now, this was done for, I think, a couple of different reasons. Initially, I believe that Matt was supposed to go with them and carry on much like they did in the book series. However, Barney Harris left the show, and when he left the show, he didn't return for filming of episode 7 and 8. Not that I'm aware of anyway, and I've done some digging. And because of that, they had to use some recycled footage, some reused shots and things like that to make it look like he was standing outside the way gate indecisive, and then he didn't enter the ways while everyone else did. So, kind of unfortunate that they had to do that, but Barney Harris exited the show, so they had to do something. And almost in every instance when someone exits the show, it's usually pretty clunky when they try to write them out or film around it, because they're not there to gracefully make an exit in most cases. So, here, however, we have something just a little bit different. Moiraine uses the one power to open the way gate, and then at the very end of the way, she's using the one power again while Nynaeve protects them from the Black Wind. That really doesn't happen that way in the books. It's a bit different, but it does showcase Nynaeve's extreme power again. So we're showing her that she's really, truly powerful a second time, which puts more eyes on her of quite possibly being the dragon. Because, let's face it, up to this point, Amazon and Sony have been basically pushing this down on everyone, saying that the dragon could be anybody. When in fact we know it's Rand, and I think I know the explanation for why, and we'll talk about that later on in the video. Now, one other thing I do want to mention is that there are leaves in the show. The Avendesor leaves that open the way gates and allow them to be closed are in the show. They're 100% canon in the show because we've seen still shots from the X-ray features that show Paddan Fane holding an Avendesor leaf, which basically explains how we get into the ways and out of the ways. Although why they cut those scenes so it's not explained to the casual viewer, I have no idea really. But all in all, pretty visually powerful scene. Alright, so now we're in Fal Dara. So essentially at this point, some of what happens in Fal Dara kind of matches up with what happens in the books, but there are some major changes as well. So we do get to see the fact that Moiraine and Lan do know Lord Agelmar. They are integrated into the Borderlands community. They've been in Fal Dara before, especially Lan. However, Lord Agelmar's character is fundamentally changed. He's not the same as he is in the books. In the books, he is very receptive to all counsel, especially an Aes Sedai's counsel like Moiraine, because he does respect her very much. He is completely focused on protecting everyone and protecting everything, and that is his job. That is his whole reason for being. Now, in the show, he's a little more arrogant, he's a little more cocksure, he thinks he knows better. He actually interrupts Moiraine a couple of times, which wouldn't have happened in the books. Now, I think there's a reason they did this, and we'll get into that in a second, but do know that his character is a bit different from the books to the show. Now, in the book series, essentially what happens is, after they exit the ways, they show up in Fal Dara, and they go to see Lord Agelmar. They also find out that Paddan Fane, has tried to scale the walls to enter Fal Dara. He was captured, and then Moiraine interrogates him. After she interrogates him, you find out he has a dark friend. He's been pursuing them for, forever, basically, and it wasn't only until the last few years that he found out it was at least one of the three boys who was the Dragon Reborn, the one he was searching for. And those scenes were really powerful in the book, and they set up a lot of reasons to go to the Eye of the World. However, the show does this completely different. Paddan Fane exits the Waygate, actually, in the next scene that I'm not going to show here because it only lasts about 3 seconds, but you don't see how he exits. He just exits, and then you see him again later on with Perrin and Egwene passing by them in the market, and they do mention that he was there when the Trollocs attacked at Beltime, and he's probably dead, even though Perrin was sure that he's seen him. So another big change. Now we have the scene with Moiraine and Lady Amalisa. Again, this is completely different from the book series. It doesn't actually happen, but I think they've done this for a reason. So there's nothing really to compare it in the books, except the fact that Lady Amalisa is trained in the White Tower. She wasn't powerful enough to make it to full sisterhood, and she does have a ring, so I believe she's made it to at least accept it. The parallel to this in the book series is Morgase, the Queen of Andor, who we do get to meet in the Eye of the World, and we didn't meet in the show, also trained at the White Tower. She was not powerful enough to make it to accept it, although they gave her a ring when they sent her on her way when she knew enough about the one power to not hurt herself or anyone else. So I think they're showcasing here that nobility has and does go to the White Tower to train, especially countries with big ties to the White Tower, and they're setting something up for Episode 8. There's no reason for them to showcase Lady Amalisa's power, because, they did that unless they're going to have a payoff in the next episode. Now, having a good authority that we're going to see something very interesting with her in the next episode, so I think she may be joining the fight with maybe Egwene, Nynaeve, and Moiraine. That's my guess anyway. All right, so now we skip to a scene in a tavern with Min. We do meet her a little bit differently here than we do in the books, although her basic character is pretty much the same. So we see the fact that she can see certain things about people depending on how important to the pattern they are, and she can see visions about them, so little bits of the future. They call her a seer. I think that's a word that's used to describe her much later in the book series by someone else. I didn't give spoilers that far, so I won't mention that. But this basically keeps her character almost entirely intact. The way Min is played is the same. The way that she showcases herself and carries herself around other people is the same, and her talents are the same. Although the scene is completely different. We're going way, way back to near the first of the Eye of the World in the book series when we meet Min. And that happens in Berlin, which is just right outside Emond's Field, Terran Ferry. They leave, it's the first city they go to, and they meet her in an inn. They also meet some other important characters there that we do see again later on in the book series, but Min is by far the most important one. And the scenes are very different. So essentially at that point, that's when Nynaeve meets up with everybody. It's well before Shader Logoth, and Min does have visions about a bunch of different people, and she talks to Moiraine about them, a few things to the people there as well. But mostly what I want to say here is that the main vision she has of sparks trying to hold back the darkness is the same between the books and the show, and that shows that they all need to work together, they all need to be there, and if they're all together, the sparks seem to hold their own rather than being swallowed by the darkness. So again, very different setup, and that's probably because they cut Berlin completely due to money and time. I think it works well because, let's face it, I mentioned this a couple times already in this video, Sony and Amazon are trying to hide the fact that Rand is the dragon as long as possible, although they do reveal it during this episode. So if they showcase some of these visions way back in the very first or the second episode of the series, there'd be almost no guessing that Rand is the dragon because the book did a terrible job of hiding that. You knew almost right away. Alright, so next we have a scene that showcases a couple of different things. This does not happen in any way, shape, or form in the book series, and it actually shows something that really polarized the fans one way or another. And we're going to talk about that too. So the scene starts off with Moiraine. She basically says that one of them is the dragon, they're going to the Eye of the World, and at the Eye of the World they're going to fight the Dark One. Everyone else that's there is going to die. That's pretty much what they say, because they're going to be caught between two forces of nature, the dragon and the Dark One. Very different from the books. Exceptionally different. At this point, when they're in Fal Dara in the book series, they know that they have to be there, and Moiraine actually tells Lord Agelmar that the boys are going to be doing the fighting, or the most of the fighting at the Eye, and he assumes it was the girls. So he assumes it would be Egwene and Nynaeve, because women can use the power, and if they're going to do something at the Eye, it has to do with the one power. But when they mention that it's one of the boys that has to be there, he gets very taken aback, and it's kind of a powerful scene, and I'm a little sad they cut that and changed it. Here, however, they're basically still going on that one of them is the dragon. They don't know who. It could include Egwene, and they're even sort of including Nynaeve still at this point, even though she's too old, and that's been mentioned a couple of times, because they're going on the fact that the prophecies can be unreliable and badly translated. Now, the second part of the scene, again, is polarizing to the fandom. A lot of people hated it, a lot of people liked it, so let me know in the comments down below what you folks thought about this particular scene, because it gives voice to the fact that there is sort of a pseudo-love triangle between Perrin, Egwene, and Rand. Now, we know that Rand and Egwene are together in the show much more than they are in the books. Now, in the book series, yes, they did have a relationship. It was talked about a few times, but it was never built, it was never developed, and you never really felt any sort of connection to it. It just kind of was there, and then when it went away later on, no one really cared, because they didn't seem like they were together anyway. In the show, they're pushed together a lot harder, I guess, than in the books. However, it's also been talked about by the showrunner, a few of the actors and actresses that worked in the show, and other people in interviews, that the reason that Perrin and Lila were sort of having some marriage troubles is because Perrin held a flame, or he had some feelings for Egwene. And that's what comes out here. Nynaeve basically says it right outright, and Rand gets upset, and there's kind of a big fight. The reason this is polarizing to the fandom is because a lot of people think it has zero basis in fact to the books. It's completely made up, and it's just sort of like more drama for the show. There is a small tidbit of truth to this, and it's like a lot of the other changes they made for the show. They take a small bit that's true in the books, and they expand upon it. So this small bit is the fact that Perrin does have feelings for Egwene in the books. He says, not like a sister, more than that, but her and Rand. And then he gets flustered and stops talking. And that's when he's talking to Elias, when essentially they're escaping the Ravens and going into the setting. and it's talking about killing her, how he would spare her from the death of being killed by the ravens, and he has some very strong feelings towards her while they're talking about that. It could be interpreted that he liked her, but would never act upon it because, of course, her and Rand were together. It could also be interpreted that he feels that she's more than a sister. She is like family. There's a whole lot of interpretations there, and as many people as I've talked to, I've had that many interpretations thrown at me. So let me know what you folks think in the comments down below. Do you feel like those small passages in the book could turn into, a full-blown romance between Perrin and Egwene? Because the explanation that I got when I kind of dug into this a little bit was the fact that there was a nugget of it in the book and they just expanded upon it in the show. So there's that. So anyway, let me know what you folks think down below in the comments about it. Alright, so the next couple of scenes have no real basis in the books, except that for the show they offer some character development and some world building. And they seem to hurry some things along a whole lot. So you get a little bit more of a relationship between Nynaeve and Lan a lot quicker. So this first scene is Lan. He went to see a Malkiri family in Fal Dara. Zahir, he knows him. He was one of his father's armsmen. And there's talk of his history. What happened with him? There's talk of Malkir, talk of the family, what different things mean to him. And none of this happens in the books because you don't find out about any of this stuff unless you've read New Spring and you know the history, or you find out tidbits of this stuff much later on in the book series and it's spaced out a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. It's not all in one big chunk where it explains it in one spot. So I think what they did here is they wanted to explain the fact that he was an uncrowned king. He doesn't have a country anymore. Explain his sadness, explain his basic journey in battle against all things against the shadow. And they also wanted to fast forward the relationship between Nynaeve and Lan. Now, Nynaeve and Lan in the book series, again, I only gave spoilers up to book 4, but even up to that point, you see that they're dancing around a lot, and that's 4 books in. They're not a fully formed relationship yet. In the show, they've taken that leaps and bounds, and they actually sleep together, which is not something that Nynaeve's character probably would have done in any way, shape, or form until much, much, much later on after she's developed a whole lot. And I think they did this for a couple of different reasons. One, they can't develop the relationship between the two of them over the next 5 seasons. It just would be too slow. The audience would get bored. They wouldn't care about it. If they develop it quicker, then maybe, perhaps, some other aspects of their story can develop a little bit quicker too, because we do know they're cutting large swaths of the books out. It's going to happen. They only have about 8 seasons. That's what they're planning for. There's 14 books, 15 if you include New Spring. So they're going to cut large portions of things out. So I think what they're doing is they're hurrying a lot of the different plot lines along. Now, the next scene that we see is Egwene and Rand, and that's basically just them talking. So it talks a little bit about them and their relationship, and again, that is more character development, developing the relationship for the viewer. It has no real basis to anything that happens in the book series. All right, next we have this scene here. Essentially, it's Rand thinking about everything that's happened along his entire journey, all the way from the very beginning, leaving Emond's Field, up to the fact that they've entered Fal Dara. The fact that he's used up one power a number of different times. He saved Egwene with it, he saved himself with it, and Machin Shin actually told him he's the Dragon Reborn. This is where he comes to that realization that he is the dragon, and this is the big reveal to everyone, all of the viewers. It culminates with a meeting with Min. Now, when they go talk to Min, she basically tells him her viewings of him. Now, these viewings are essentially that he's the Dragon Reborn, that he has to go to the Eye of the World, but she also says a couple of different things as well. So this is the big giant reveal. This is the, I guess, supposed surprise that Rand is the dragon. And a few people that I've talked to that didn't read the book series up to this point thought Rand was sort of a throwaway character. Other people have guessed, but there's quite a few people I've talked to that didn't think that Rand would be the dragon at all. And in fact, even after this episode, I've talked to people who think it's a joke, that there's going to be some rug pulled out from underneath them later on and it'll be someone else who's the dragon. So if that was Amazon and Sony's intention to hide this from everybody, they did a good job, at least in some cases. Now, Min then gives him a couple of different prophecies about him. The fact that he has 3 beautiful women in his life. That is 100% something that happens in the book series. I can't really talk about too much about it because I didn't give spoiler warnings beyond, but he does have 3 women in his life in the book series, and Min does have that sort of viewing about him. The second thing is that she sees rainbows and a carnival in his future. Now, I've speculated in my Easter egg video that the carnival is probably the Foregate in Cairhien, which is where they go to during the second book in The Great Hunt. That's where he meets Tom again. And I've also speculated the fact that the rainbows are most likely the fact of the steps. They go up to a portal stone. So maybe if he's using the portal stone at the beginning of the second season, that's what she's seeing rainbows about. Although the rainbows could mean any number of different things, and I've heard a bunch of different things, but I still like the fact that I believe it's probably the portal stones. All right, now the end of the show is essentially this. The very cliffhanger end is that Moiraine masks her bond, and her and Rand leave, and they go into the Blight together, and they're going to the Eye of the World by themselves, because he knows he's the Dragon Reborn, he's told her he's the Dragon Reborn, and she is trying to save everyone else. She knows that going there, she's going to die. Very, very different from the book series. So essentially in the book series, you have everyone going to the Eye of the World all together. The Eye of the World is a green space beyond what they normally think would be certain mountains and stuff, but it can change. It's all over the place. It's found by need. And usually, if a person needs to find it, they will, unless they've already found it once. You can't find it twice. Moiraine happens to find it for a second time during the Eye of the World, and then there's a bunch of events that take place during there. We're not going to get into them just yet, because we're not quite there yet in the show, but what I wanted to focus on here is the fact that Moiraine and Rand are going by themselves to the Eye, and everyone else is left back in Fal Dara. So this leads me to believe that perhaps you're going to have Lan, Nynaeve, Perrin, Egwene, and perhaps maybe Lady Amalisa, Lord Agelmar, all fighting at Tarwins Gap, and we're going to see them all fighting there. Although, personally, I think that if they keep Lan's character even remotely the same as the books, he would have dropped everything and just booked her to the Blight to try to find Moiraine, because he knows she's going to the Eye and he's going to do everything he can to protect her. Although I think in the show that because she's masked the bond, he's just going to give up, he's going to stay, he's going to protect Nynaeve, his budding relationship with her, and protect the other Emond's Fielders, and fight in Tarwin's Gap. That's my guess anyway. So, I've alluded to a couple times during the video, and I've said it, that I think I know why they've cut the show the way they did, and it just dawned on me recently. I've had a lot of complaints in my review videos, and the big complaints were that the editing is terrible. And it has been, because there are a lot of things cut, there's a lot of things that don't make any sense, there's a lot of things that are intentionally left out, and that if they added maybe another even 5 or 10 minutes to each episode to explain a few things, or add some of the scenes that they've cut out, it would make the episode flow better, and it would make people understand it a bit better. Now, something that someone said to me the other day is, the book series is very character-centric, so when you're reading a chapter from a character's point of view, you only know what they know. Most of the first season of this show is from Moraine's point of view, so we know what she knows in some cases. That makes it very difficult for the showrunner and the writers of the show to explain the world, because if they're showing it from Moraine's point of view, she already knows all this stuff. Now, if they showed it from Rand or Egwene or Perrin or Matt's point of view like they did in the books, they don't know much about big cities. They don't know anything about the One Power. They don't know anything. So when it's explained to them, it's explained to the reader as well. Now, in the show, they've changed that, and Moiraine is the main character. And that's not even up for debate. We know she's the main character because they've said that a few times. So almost everything's from her point of view, except the scenes without her in it. Now, the scenes without her in it are all from one of the other characters' point of views, and that's when we get weird editing. So, for example, one from this episode is Nynaeve. She was following Lan. She followed him to the house, watched him with the family. She seemed to get lost in thought, and then all of a sudden he was behind her. He didn't teleport. It wasn't like that. It was, she didn't know what was going on. She lost herself for a bit, and then he was there from her point of view. We have some things from Rand's point of view here and there. When he broke down that door, when he was with Dana the Darkfriend, that whole scene wasn't from his point of view. It was from Dana the Darkfriend's point of view, so we didn't see the weaves. So I think that they went back through and they edited the show in such a fashion that they've chosen characters for each of these scenes to be the point of view from, and they edited it that way. So we only know what that character knows. We don't see other things. Nothing is explained. Nothing goes on. And that's why we have the show maybe perhaps not explaining things as well as it could to some of the viewers. It's because they've intentionally done that. Now, that's my thought on it anyway. Now, I want to hear what you folks think in the comments down below. Do you think the editing, cutting certain things out, the way they paced the show was on purpose? Was it because they had things from Maureen's point of view as the main character, or from other people's point of views? It's almost as if they never showcased Rand, Matt, Perrin, any of them as their main point of view for any of the scenes. It always seemed to be from other people's point of views, whether it was the Grinwells, Dana the Dark Friend, the Tinkers. Those scenes all seem to be from their point of view and not the, who we would assume would be the main characters. Anyway, it's just a thought. Let me know what you folks think down below in the comments. All right, thank you so very much for sticking with me here to the very end. Here's to many more.